This is Gemara Pesachim Daf Pei. Tonight here should be a special schos for Shlomo Chaim Yitzchak Moshe Ben Esther Rezel, as well as Chaim Bicham Demalkin Meir Meir Kier Menel Ben Vikun Michael Sibur Nassas Hili Uva Chaim Ben Sar Shlomo Sibur Rezel Sar Baskin Adi Debasim Chai Sar Yisrael Ben Mendel Eliezer President Shavalei Shalom Bas Nami B'Shafiu Shavi Chad V'Hol Damini to Riva Shalom Ben Tehila Daniel Ben Chan Rezel Malkul Chai Bas Mina Librach Bas Taviu Musa Beisai Shar Chali Yisrael. We pick it up on the bottom of Ayin Testament Bees. We actually pulled up a little short. I thought we should have read these last few lines, and we should have. I made a mistake. I apologize. Again, let's just get ourselves back into things. We have three shitas. We have Rav Kahana with two shitas. We have Rav with one shita. This began way back when on Ayin Testament Aleph that said the Gemara, what is the status when Klal Yisrael is 50-50, half Tameh, half Tar? What do you do? Rav said 50-50 is like Roiv. Rav Kahana said 50-50 is not like Roiv. Rav said 50-50 is like Roiv. What does that mean? You have a unique entity that 50% are like a Roiv, and therefore what? The 50 that are Tameh, then now it's Roiv Klal Yisrael is B'Tama. They can bring Karban B'Tama. Then you have 50% which is Taira. It's like Roiv which is Taira. They can bring Karban. So everyone's going to bring the Karban Pesach Rishon, half Tameh, half Tar. Rav Kahana came along and said that doesn't make any sense. Now we have two ways of learning Rav Kahana. Either Rav Kahana learned that the Tar will bring now and the Tameh will bring, they're not a Roiv, so they'll have to bring the Pesach Sheni. Or the second way of learning Rav Kahana is that the Tar will bring now and the Tameh will have to bring neither Pesach Rishon nor Pesach Sheni. We're on the last of the medium-sized lines with Rav Kahana. This is concluding. We had prices back and forth. We had three prices, one corroborating Rav, one Rav Kahana, one Rav Kahana. And then we asked back and forth how does each one learn the other brisa. And now we're going to conclude the Rav Kahana, the time that we learned in a brisa. Harisha Yisrael Mechsla Tahirim. When Klal Yisrael is 50-50, Mechsla Tameim, first very wide line. Halalu Ois and Asman, Halalu Ois and Asman. Heichem and Tarisla. How does Rav Kahana answer up that brisa? Amar Lacha, Rav Kahana. Tanahi. At this point, Rav Kahana finally folds, and he says it's going to have to be Machligas Tanayim. So after a very, very long story, it comes out that Rav is able to defend his opinion, but Rav Kahana has to come along and say it is a Machligas Tanayim, whether 50-50 is a Rav. Kufa says the Gemara Reisha Yisrael Mechsa Tahirin Umechsa Tameim. Let's go into the brisa. 50 Tar, 50 Tamei. Halal Ois and Atzman, Halal Ois Latman. This is the din of Rav. They each can do it for themselves. Hayit Tameim, Oitvan Al Tahirim. But let's say those who are Tamei were more than those who are Tar. Afilu Echad, one Jew in Klal Yisrael tilted the scale. He makes the Tameim more than what's Halacha Yaseh B'Toma. For one Jew, 50-50, one guy became Tamei. Now majority is Tamei. Now you let him bring the current Pesach B'Toma. Why? Because you can't split it up. And once you have the majority being Tamei, everyone brings it with Tama. Rav Lazar ben Nasni Oimer, Ein HaYachid Machriyas L'Tzibur. He says, no, that's too far. A Yachid cannot be Machriyas L'Tzibur L'Tama. Shenamar, how do I know that? It says Rav Lazar ben Masna. As we move along to Peyam and Aleph Shenamar, it says in the Torah, Lo Yisucha Lizbech Azabezcha Ba'achat Sharecha, which Rashi points out, we darshan that B'Shvil Yachid, that for one person, we can't check the Karban Pesach, which is what's teaching us if one person tilts the scale, that is not enough. Rav Shimon Amer, Afilu Shevet Echad Tamei, one Shevet. B'shar kol hashvatim ta'irim. Then Halal Ois and Atzman, Halal Ois and Atzman. Then that Shevet is called its own Rav. They can bring it b'tama, and everyone else will bring it b'tayra. My time of the Rav Shimon says the Gemara, Kasavar Shevet Echad Ikri Kal. One Shevet is like the whole Kal, and therefore if they are Tamei, they can bring it b'tama, and everyone else will bring it b'tayra. Rav Yehuda Amer, a third opinion, he says Afilu Shevet Echad Tamei. B'shar kol hashvatim ta'irim Yaseh b'tama. Everyone could bring B'Tama, says Rav Yehuda, fascinating. One Shevet is Tamei, now the whole Klal Yisrael can bring B'Tama. Why? Because we cannot split up the Karban Sibur. Rav Yehuda Savar, Shevet Echad Ikri Kal. But he takes it to the next level. Rav Shimon said Shevet Echad Ikri Kal, and that their own little Kal, so they can bring B'Tama, but not everyone else. Rav Yehuda says Shevet Echad Ikri Kal, and therefore they are their own Kal. Vavli Palgo makes it as if they're 50-50. Therefore says Rav Yehuda, they could all bring a B'Tama. Three fascinating levels. What we're going to do, we had the first opinion that said, Rav Lazar ben Masya, the Tanakama said, a Yachid can be Machri, he can tilt the scale. Rav Lazar ben Masya said, no, that's too far, a Yachid cannot tilt the scale. Then we had two levels over here. Rav Shimon said, a Shevet Echad, it's called its own Kal, they can bring a B'Tama, but not the rest of Klal Yisrael. And finally, we had the last opinion of Rav Yehuda, that said, not only can that Shevet bring a B'Tama, but the whole Klal Yisrael can bring a B'Tama because of that Shevet. Says the Gemara, Itmar. Hay Yisrael, Mechsa Ta'irin Mechsa Tameim. Let's figure this out. 50-50. Amar Rav. Mitamin echamem b'sheretz. What are you going to do? It's 50-50. Says Rav, you make one of them become tamei sheretz, and then you'll have majority being tamei, like we said before, and then they'll all bring you a tumah. Ask the Gemara, V'amai, nevdi ani lechudayu, v'ani lechudayu. Why don't they each do it on their own? Tamar Rav, Rav was the opinion that we saw yesterday. Remember, there was Rav Kahana and Rav. Rav said that what should you do in this scenario when it's 50-50? Each one should bring it separately. So why are you telling me they should make one of the guys tamei? Says the Gemara, really the case is there were more tameim than tayrim. Echad of one. I mean, there was one more person. So it's not that we say to go become tamei, seemingly the Gemara is saying right now, but it was one more person tamei, so that's what you have to do. He says the Gemara, havli rubim tameim. 1 second. If one more is Tameh, so they have the majority. Navdi Kulibatamas, let them all bring you a Tama. What's going on over here? Savarla Kravlaz ben Masya. I was like Kravlaz ben Masya, Damar. Any Achlachri is a Sibra Latama. Says Mara 1 second. Iachi, Hadar Kashal Duchte, your question implodes himself. Navdi Anil Chudayo, Anil Chudayo. So if we're not going with Kravlaz ben Masya, which says, well, one tilts the scale, so we're back with the original din of Rav, that is 50-50, so each one should do it on their own. Says the Gemara, Elo hachi kamar. I katana desavar katana kama. Damar palga lo yavdi kulu betama. Is this someone who holds like the Tanakh Kama that says 50-50? You don't do betama. Bisavar like Rav Yehuda damar in carbon zib chaluk. Then what are you going to have to do? Metaman echem emisharet. The Gemara is saying if you have both opinions together, if you coincide with the Tanakh Kama that says 50-50, cannot be brought betama. And Rav Yehuda that says you can't split it up, so now you're stuck. What are you going to do? Because on one hand you can't bring betama, on the other hand you can't split up Klal Yisrael. So what do? Then you make one person become tamei, so that he'll have the right being tamei, and then he could bring the carbon that way. That is the first answer. That is what Rav, as you see here, highlighted a little bit darker. Rav says, "Metam and echamiyem b'sheretz." Comes along Ula, and he has a different eitzah. Ula amar mishalchen echamiyem l'derech richoika. We send one of them away to a very far away land. You send one of them out of the camp of Klal Yisrael, and that's how you now make tilt the scales. Again, we're trying to make it that it's not a 50-50. So if you send one person away, it's not going to be 50-50. Says Mar, why do you have to send someone away? Vitamin and b'sheretz make him tummy. Says Mar, you know why? We hold that if the tumah is only the level of sheretz, you're yes allowed to bring the shchita and do the zrika. Says Mar, okay, so why don't we just make the person Tamei Meis? Answers the Gemara, because then what's going to happen is you're going to push it away from the carbon chagiga. Says the Gemara, great. So if you make him Tamei Meis, he can't bring the chagiga, and he also can't bring the carbon Pesach. Says the Gemara, Efshar the Avid B'Sheni. So he says, no, if you make the person Tamei Meis, he can bring the carbon the next day after he waits the requisite time. But Meis Nami Efshar David B'Shvi. What do you mean? He can also wait 7 days to bring for the Meis. Says the Gemara, David Shmini Shalai, which is his 8th day. Says the Gemara, a very important rule. Everything by Karban Chagiga only, not by the Pesach. Again, by the Pesach is what we're saying. We could make you Tamei, or we could send you away like Ula said. But why can't we do this by the Chagiga? Because with regard to the Karban Chagiga, Ula holds Kulu Tashlumin Derishin Inu. The Chazi Berishin, if you're able to bring it out first, Chazi Bekulu. So it's not going to help to have Tashlumim on the Karban Chagiga according to the opinion of Ula, and that is the reason why, according to Ula, you have to send them out of the camp. Amr le'ura Nachman Zilu v'Amr le'ula go tell Ula. Man tzayis darker sicha umashchante v'ra'et. Who is the person that's going to go and be sent out of camp? Ula, your eats is not possible. Someone's actually going to leave Klal Yisrael? That's never going to happen. And therefore they told Ula, you shouldn't do what you said. Rather, let's think of what we said before. As you see in Rashi, and you're going to pick up your tent and run away. Who's going to hold like that? Rashi says, who's going to be the matriach himself that way? And therefore says the Gemara, Ula, your eats is not as good as Rav's eats. What was Rav's eats? Just make them tamei. So that again, just a quick synopsis, we have Machlekes Rav and Ula. What is the appropriate way to deal with this 50-50 party? How do we tilt the scales? Rav said that we make them Tamei Sheretz, which the Gemara favors at the end. And Ula said you send them out of the camp. Itmar says the Gemara. Now we're going to have a bunch of cases, a bunch of permutations, figuring out what do we do. So we have majority are Tamei Zav, A minority are Tamei Meis. We have to remember by Tamei Zav is that, as Rashi points out, Ruban Zav and Deloy Matzlan Evid Berishain. We learned this out from Xeris Akasav about a week or two ago, that the only time you could bring the carbon Pesach with Tama is if it's Tamei Meis, but not if it's Tamei Zav. So even though the majority of Klal Yisrael are Tamei Zav, you still are not going to be able to bring the carbon Pesach. Okay, but the minority are Tamei Meis. What do we do now? Amar Rav, they get messed over, they can't bring either carbon. Why not? They're minority, and we know the only time you can bring carbon Pesach B'Tama is if you're the majority. Apologies, let's get the Gemara back in front of us. Here it is. They can't bring the carbon Pesach Sheni. Why not? Because when Klal Yisrael brings the first carbon, then Avid Yachid B'Sheni. Then a Yachid could bring the carbon Pesach Sheni. But if no one in Klal Yisrael brought the first carbon, you can't bring the carbon Pesach Sheni. A fascinating idea emerges, says the Gemara. The only time you have a Pesach Sheni is if you have a Pesach Rishon. Meaning, if Klal Yisrael, there were people that were Tahar and they brought a Pesach Rishon, then if a Yachid, if a singular individual is Tamei, he brings the Pesach Sheni. But says the Gemara, in this case, it's unique. No one brought the carbon Pesach because they're all Tamei Zav. So very good, you're a Tamei Meis, and you want to bring the Pesach Sheni, we're not going to allow you because there was no carbon brought. Amrlu Shmuel, says Shmuel, he's not happy with this. Again, this was a statement of Rav. Says Shmuel, I'm not so happy. Zilu Amrle, go tell them La'aba, which is Rav. He says you got to bring the carbon Pesach in its right time. My obviously. So what are you going to do? Amar Lu, meaning you got to bring the carbon Pesach. There's no carbon Pesach that year. Amar Lu, so Rav responds, Zilu Amrule, Kave Kulu Zavin, Mayaviditile. What are our options? Ella, Kivan Lo Yavshir, Lo Yavshir, Hachanami Lo Yavshir. This is also a case of Lo Yavshir. And then meaning, I'm sorry, I read that too fast. Amrulei Ki Kulu Zavin Mayaviditile. If everyone in Klal Yisrael would have been Tamei Zav, what would you say? You say, no, we can do. They're all Tamei Zav, and Zav can't bring a Pesach Sheni. They can't bring a Pesach Sheni. You shouldn't up the creek. Ella, so says Rav, Kivan Lo Yavshir, similarly over here, Lo Yavshir, Hachanami Lo Yavshir. It's a case of impossibility, and therefore we're not going to be able to bring the carbon Pesach. That was case number one. Itmar, case number two, Reuben Tamei Mesim. Majority of Tamei Meis, Miyuta, and Zavin. And the minority are Tamei Zav. Ravuna Amar says Ravuna ain't Tashlum Pesach. There's no Tashlumim for the carbon Pesach. Hababatum. Ravad Rava Amar Yeshav Shum Pesach Hababatum. So name of Aklamivli. What is this machlekes? Again, what is the case? Majority of Klal Yisrael are Tamei Meis, and minority are Zavin. So we know that when the majority are Tamei Meis, they're going to be allowed to bring the carbon Pesach Rishon. Now the question is, what do we do with the minority that were Zavin and cannot bring the carbon? So Ravuna says there's no Tashlumim. Rabba says there is yes tashlumim. So says the Gemara, what is this machlekes with regards to the Tamei Zavim? What they're going to do? Name of Akalnifki. Demand Amarin tashlumim the Pesach about Batoma because every holds Tama dechuya yibetira. Very gishmak. The one that says that you can't fix it is dechuya. Dechuya means what? It just gets pushed off, but it's still there. Why? What does he hold? Kusavar he holds. Apologies. Kusavar he holds. Says no, that's not the machlekes between Rav Huna and Ravad Barava. Amri loy the kuli alma tamaduchi b'tibur. Uba bligi this the machlekes. Mar savar Rav Huna holds to Mar savar tahira midchaya. That when you're tar, you get pushed off, not when you're tummy. Omar Savar, Rav is going to know that Filu Toma Nami Milchaya. It's going to be a fundamental machlekes when someone can get pushed off. You see the Tabrashi Tahira Milchaya. Toma Lesheni Kiavdi Sibur B'Tahira. Only when it's a tar, that's when you can get pushed off. Itmar, we have one more statement, one more case before we get to the new Mishnah. Itmar, Hayu Shlishis, the third case, but it's also a third. A third is Zavin. Shlishis Tahira, Shlishis Tamei Mason. Again, we had case number one on Amid Aleph, discussing when the majority are Zavin. We have case number two with majority of Tamei Mesim and minority are Zavin. Now we have case number three teaching us you have a third Zavin, a third Tamei Mesim, and a third Tahirim. What do you do now? Amar Rabbi Mani Bar Patish, I said Tamei Mesim, and I said Rishon Lois Sheni. Tamei Meis can't do anything. Barish Le'avdi, why not? Hey, do Zavin al Tahirim? Because the Zavin are more. Zavin with the Tahirim are more than Tamei Mesim. Tavi Betama. Have they Tamei Mesim? You Tami Utal Avdi Rishon. They're minority minority can't bring the Pesach Rishon. B'sheni lo yavdi, why not? This is Zavin and Tamei Mason, because now it comes out the other majority. Zavin go together with Tamei Mason to Lavdi. So it comes out something very interesting, that each equation falls to mess you up, that they're not going to be able to bring the Pesach Rishon nor the Pesach Sheni, and if it's the third and third, you're not going to be able to bring any carbon for the Tamei Mason. Says the new Mishnah. HaPesach shenizrak tamay. You did a zrika. V'achach noida shu tamay. Then you found out, the carbon was tamei. Hatzitz meratzeh. The tzitz gives you the kapara. Tzitz makes sure it works. Nitzma agof. Ain't a tzitz meratzeh. But if the body of the carbon becomes tamei, then it doesn't work. Mimnei sha'amru anazir. That we see that by the carbon nazir and the pesach, the tzitz only works for the dam. And it says meratzeh al tumas agof. It does not work for the toma of the gof. Nitma tomas hataim, which we have to see what that means. The toma of the depth, which means it's like a concealed form of toma that we don't really know what that is. Then yes, hatzitz is meratzeh. Before we go into the Gemara, let's see one line in Rashi. When we kept saying, the Mishnah said nitma haguf. What does nitzma haguf mean? So Rashi points out, very important in the second narrow line, nitma baila of tomas guf meis. Doesn't mean that the carbon is tamei. It means that the bailim are tamei. The bailim are tamei, then the tzitz does not help, and that's when you're going to have to bring a carbon pesach sheni. Says the Gemara. The seemingly for the Mishnah, only since you did this Rika, then you found out that it was Tamei. That's what it works. Avol, the obvious implication is if you knew about it, you did this Rika anyways. Lo imiratze, the tzitz does not help. For a minu, I'll ask you a stira contradiction. Amar tzitz miratze. For what does the tzitz work? Says the Brisa. Aladam for the dam valabasar, valacheda for the meat, the flesh, the fats. That what? Shenitma, beim b'shayge, beim mizid, beim einis, beim miratze, beim yacha, beim mitziber. In all of these cases, the tzitz is yes miratze. So says the Gemara, why are you learning out from the Mishnah that the tzitz only works if you did this rika without knowledge? We see that it works even if you know b'mezid. Amar Avina, tamasai, when it's tama, beim b'shayge, beim mizid, hurts. Zrikasai, then b'shayge yurtza mezid lo yurtza. Ravina answers the difference between what is Tamei. If it's Tamei, then it works b'shayeg or mezid. But if you're talking about the Zrika, which is our Mishnah, it's only going to work b'shayeg and not b'mezid. Rav Shila argues on Ravina, and he says Zrikasai with regard to the Zrika, bein b'shayeg bein b'mezid hortza. Whether it's b'shayeg or b'mezid, it's going to work. Tamasai with regard to being Tamei b'shayeg hortza b'mezid lo yortza. Says the Gemara, 1 second, but according to Rav Shila, elahadik tani bein b'shayeg bein b'mezid, that which it said in the Brisa, whether it works b'shayeg b'mezid hachi cover. This is what Rav Shila says it means. Nitma b'shayeg, if it became Tami b'shayeg, v'zarku, and you did a zrika bein b'shayeg bein b'mezid, and you did a zrika, whether you did a b'shayeg or b'mezid, hortza, then it's going to work. V'hadik tani, and that which it says, dam shenizer b'achach naida, meaning our Mishnah, meaning according to Rav Shila, we have to answer up 2 things. Number 1, we have to explain the Brisa. Number 2, we have to explain the Mishnah. So how are we going to explain the Mishnah? Now, v'hadik tani, dam shenizer b'achach naida, taima din izrak, b'achach naida, avol naida b'achach izrak loy, says Rav Shila, the Gemara answers for Rav Shila, who adin, dafilu naida He's learn the Mishnah differently. That really, even if you know about it, and then you do the Zrika. And that which we said, that only the case is when you did the Zrika, and then you found out why different thing Chedesh. The Baila mystics who wanted to teach me, Seifa wanted to teach me in the end, Nitma Agof, then Ein Titzmarat said, Dafilu Nizar B'achanaida loy. Because when the case is when the owners are Tameh, it's never going to work, even if you did it afterwards. So according to Rav Shila, he argues on the entire premise of our question, that according to Rav Shila, it doesn't begin. Again, we started off after the Mishnah. We're going to conclude over here. We're going to pick it up with the 2 dots, because this really begins a new discussion that's going to go all the way into the next daf. So let's just do a quick chazar over here. We began and we said that seemingly our Mishnah taught us a din, that the only reason why it works is if you did the Zrika and then you find out that the carbon was Tameh. But if it was vice versa, meaning if you knew the carbon was Tameh and then you did the Zrika, it's not going to work. The Gemara was bothered with a Brisa. Ravina came along and he differentiated between Zrika and Tama. Rav Shila did not like the differentiation. So then the Gemara had a deal that according to Rav Shila, How are you going to answer up the Brisa? How are you going to answer up the Mishnah? And the Gemara says that you're going to answer it up. At the end of the day is the Mishnah. Do not learn like you thought. Don't learn that there's a dig in the Mishnah that's only because you did the Zrika first. Really, Rav Shila is going to tell you even if you did the Zrika afterwards. So why did it say the case you did the Zrika first? Because of the Seifa of the Mishnah. Because the Seifa of the Mishnah taught us that a case with a Bailam Artami, it's not going to work. That's even if you did the Zrika prior, it's not going to work. Because the Bailam Artami will pick it up for the two dots of Nitma Tumas Atahayim tomorrow.